and possibly good afternoon to some, and welcome to the 2020 Brotherhood and Sisterhood Gender-Based Violence Conference. This program is spearheaded by MULTICHOICE, and with its partners, they strive to be at the forefront of various women empowerment initiatives in Africa. My very next speaker is Ms. Nardos Bekele-Thomas, the resident coordinator working at United Nations. She was previously the Senior Director of the Office of the Secretary General. She also served as the UN Resident Coordinator and the UNDP Resident Representative in the Republic of Kenya and the Republic of Benin. Ms. Nardos Bekele-Thomas' interests includes the promotion of human development anchored on the principles of economic, social, and political rights for all. She makes quite an impact and made quite an impact on me when we had our function last year, right about the same time. And when we touch each other sometimes, it definitely leaves amazing memories. So I really am looking forward and want to welcome Ms. Nardos Bekele-Thomas, and I'm going to hand over to you. Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can hear you perfectly. Go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you, my sister, program director, Ms. Zanele Morrison. Good morning, Mr. Carvo Mawele, the group CEO of MULTICHOICE, my two sisters and activists, Mama Graça Marchel and Constitutional Court Judge Justice Fiona Ferron, all the panelists and speakers in today's session, my UN colleagues who are here, I'm sure they're all here with us, and ladies and gentlemen, the South African story, ladies and gentlemen, of a peaceful transition to democracy has been lauded the world over. Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu called it his rainbow nation. It was something to behold. But the light is fading on this rainbow as the veil is lifted to expose a demon, a fiend, and an enemy. The antagonist in South Africa's story is gender-based violence and femicide. A woman, as you know, is murdered every 4 hours. Nearly 60% of these women will be killed by an intimate partner. 1 in 5 women aged 18 to 24 have experienced violence from a partner and suffer from trauma. And it's estimated that gender-based violence in South Africa costs us between 28 and 42 billion rands, or 1.3% of GDP annually. While the COVID-19 pandemic claims the lives of thousands of South Africans, the shadow pandemic of gender-based violence is lurking. Every day in this country, it looks to hook its claws on its next victim, a stealthy stalker waiting to pounce. It sees past color, creed, power, status, age, and religion. It is relentless. This enemy thrives in the absence of a strong value system and moral authority. Rape, femicide, and other forms of violence against women are rooted in a complex set of patriarchal beliefs and a historically embedded culture of violence. This power and control create a social environment in which sexual violence is pervasive and normalized. A study undertaken by Sonke Gender Justice in 2016 showed 56% of men surveyed in Diepsloot, Johannesburg, said they had either raped or beaten a woman in the past 12 months. We must dismantle this power structure immediately. Every one of us has the responsibility to challenge this patriarchal behavior. It must begin with instilling principles of equality, rights, and respect in the upbringing of sons, and men holding their family, friends, and peers accountable to the reversal of toxic masculinities. Thank you, MULTICHOICE, for hosting this event and taking the necessary and obligatory steps towards standing up against gender-based violence. We, as the UN family, walk alongside you in this journey to break the cycle and say loudly, silence begets violence, not in my name. All of us participating in this event, either as a speaker or an attendee, must foster a solidarity of a brotherhood and a sisterhood to fight against gender-based violence. We're not here to tick a box that we hosted or participated in an event. We must make the necessary commitments to take action from today that says silence begets violence, not in my name. During my address this morning, ladies and gentlemen, I want to focus on just 5 messages because, in my opinion, they are the solid foundation for the implementation of the National Strategic Plan, which was launched in April by President Cyril Ramaphosa. These issues will put us on a faster lane to better implement the plan holistically and with the urgent and rigor it deserves. This commitment must be made by every single South African to act now. Silence begets violence, not in my name. Message 1, value system and leadership. Today, the Pule family in Johannesburg should be holding the newborn baby of 21 years old, Shegofasto Pule. Instead, they mourn the loss of a child and grandchild. Why? Because one night, a man took the decision to stab her multiple times and then hang her on a tree. Around the same time, 34-year-old Sibungiseni Gabada was stabbed. Her decomposing body was found chopped into pieces and stuffed inside a sports bag. And what of a 26-year-old mother of 3, Naledi Pangindao? Naledi was attending a cultural event when she was attacked and hacked to death with an axe. Let's not forget Sanele Mfamba, who was murdered and dumped in Durbansville. There are thousands of other women who met their demise through GBV, but their passing did not make the news headlines. Ladies and gentlemen, these stories should not be associated with South Africa, a country with the most celebrated constitution in the world. I recall the mid-90s when the South African constitution was passed. The international community celebrated it with much respect and admiration. It proudly lists socioeconomic rights to protect and assist those most disadvantaged by apartheid, particularly the poor and most vulnerable. For me, then it affirmed democratic South Africa's principles and value system. But today, we should hang our heads in shame. How do we action this founding document of democracy, a document deeply rooted in South Africa's Freedom Charter? Is it mere words strung together? I painfully ask this because in practice, we are desecrating every word of this glorious document. Every day, when GBV takes place, we are erasing the words of our value system, a system where basic human rights are given clear prominence with a stated intention to establishing a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we find ourselves living in a society where our values have been depleted and the moral authority absent. How did we get here and to a point where we are attacking the very form that birthed us and think we have a right to do so? When did it become the new normal for intimate partners, acquaintances, strangers, and even institutions to violate women physically, sexually, and emotionally, and think it's okay to do so? When did a trip to the post office become a deadly action. 19-year-old UCT student Uyeni Mritriana should not have been raped and killed in a post office. She should be getting ready to write another set of exams towards attaining her film and media qualification. We, ladies and gentlemen, must amplify the moral regeneration movement and leave the legacy of our forefathers. The United Nations has already committed and ready to support the reinstitution of societal values and value-based leadership. Join us. Message 2, a whole of society approach, including getting bystanders to work against gender-based violence. During his presentation of the 18th annual Nelson Mandela Lecture, the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, lamented that everywhere women are worse off than men, simply because they are women. Inequality and discrimination are the norm. Violence against women, including femicide, is at epidemic levels. The Secretary General also challenged us to make gender equality, but most importantly, the empowerment of women a top priority. He reiterated the need for a whole of society approach to deal with the scourge of GBV. While MULTICHOICE is leading this important discussion, it's not up to just one organization to fight the scourge of gender-based violence. It requires, ladies and gentlemen, solidarity and collective action from us. Government at all levels, the private sector, civil society organizations, schools, families, religious institutions, communities, academia, and the media. It even requires the solidarity of those who may not be affected or impacted by the shadow pandemic of gender-based violence. We need the entire country to rally around our clarion call that silence begets violence, not in my name. Ladies and gentlemen, from the strengthening of government institutions to restoring trust and faith in the justice system, from faith-based institutions to families, schools, civil society organizations, corporate South Africa and communities, it is time to set up on your leadership and include, it's time to step up on your leadership and include the fight against gender-based violence and the fight for gender equality as part of your DNA. Faith-based institutions should reform themselves and play a critical role in dismantling patriarchy and negative social norms. Last year, history was made at the Africa for Girls Summit when the Deputy Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Sheikh Dr. Salah Abbas, issued a fatwa against child marriage applicable to millions of followers. In South Africa, Christian leaders have been vocal about the role of men, creating a GBV pledge for men, as well as preaching against GBV for the pulpit. We need to scale up initiatives of this nature. Join us. My dear Mr. Calvo Mawale, we count on MULTICHOICE to take the leadership within the media sector. I want to challenge you and other media houses today to scrutinize your messaging, advertising, and programming content. Introspect on how the perceptions that are broadcast every day further perpetuate patriarchy and assert gender-based violence. There is no doubt that the media has the power to influence views on gender. The whole of society approach, ladies and gentlemen, includes the bystander, the men and women watching from the sidelines. If we are to eliminate gender-based violence in its entirety, Then bystanders must come out of the shadows to disrupt the cultural norms and deep-seated behaviors. Whether you have witnessed intimate partner violence or experienced it, suspect it within a relationship, or know about instances from family, friends, or neighbors, every bystander, man or woman, must act. The default option of no action is a crime. A bystander must consider themselves guilty by association. The United Nations has developed a set of 10 key actions that every man should commit to, including ending and preventing violence. By getting help as a perpetrator, assisting law enforcement if he is a witness to violence, supporting survivors, speaking out within his community, or using social media, and making a commitment not to tolerate behaviors that perpetuate negative gender stereotypes and social norms. We urge you to sign up to these commitments and join us. These, ladies and gentlemen, extends to the police. The nature and characteristics of a police officer's job is to serve and protect. But we hear of cases where women are afraid of trusting the very same people who are paid by the public to keep them safe. When a woman goes to a police station to report a case, in some cases, it has become double jeopardy as she is further violated at a place of safety. When the police say to her, they are not getting involved because it's a household matter, then those who are supposed to be the protector now empower the perpetrator. Let's bring back our moral authority across all sectors. Let's make its thunderous presence felt in all our actions, in all our spaces. We all have a role to play to end the normalization of gender-based violence and make it more likely that bystanders will act. Like Miriam, who was a victim of rape, Auntie B, who could have been a bystander, watched Miriam become depressed and angry, but she convinced her to join a support group. Today, Miriam has returned to school and has hope for her future. We encourage you to emulate Auntie B. Silence begets violence, not in my name. Message 3, gender-based violence and sexual harassment in the workplace. When we focus on gender-based violence, ladies and gentlemen, our discussion must include sexual harassment and assault in the workplace. Women around the world are forced to work in intimidating, hostile, or even humiliating environments. A 2018 survey in South Africa showed that 30% of women who work in corporate environments have experienced some form of sexual misconduct. Women are asked for sexual favors, exposed to inappropriate jokes, insinuations, and comments, and also unwanted physical contact that can amount to assault. As leaders in the workplace, you and I must ensure that there is zero tolerance for sexual harassment and abuse. Companies must encourage the reporting and investigation of sexual harassment cases in the workplace by protecting whistleblowers and/or complainants. Many women, ladies and gentlemen, do not come forward for the same reason as domestic violence: fear of disbelief, blame, or social or professional retaliation and stigma. We urge all employers to implement and scale up policies of zero tolerance. Silence begets violence, not in my name. Message 4, parents and the education system. Parents should educate their children, and all learning institutions must include civic education, reinforcing our constitutional rights, lessons of equality towards a non-sexist, non-racial, democratic, and prosperous society. The curriculum must also include the principles of zero tolerance for gender-based violence, sexual abuse, and harassment. We must promote the lesson that violence does not solve anything. We must promote, again, the lesson that violence does not solve anything. This lesson to younger boys will help them understand that physical violence and other forms of abuse are not, I repeat, are not the answer to solving a problem. We must teach our children to not become a bystander. I am reminded of 6-year-old Huturano Garisape from Kimberley in the Northern Cape. Our boy died a hero after he tried to defend his mother, who was being attacked by a man who wanted to rape her. He was brutally stabbed to death with a broken bottle. His mother was walking her 2 sons to school. Ladies and gentlemen, silence begets violence, not in my name. Message 5, drugs and alcohol abuse. According to the Disease Research Unit of the University of Cape Town, binge drinking increases the risk of being a victim and a perpetrator of intimate violence. Research conducted by WHO and UNICEF also shows that it's possible to address the violent culture in South Africa by, amongst others, interviewing early in a child's life to change the cultural norms. The agencies also found that harmful use of alcohol contributed 4.6 times to the risk of exposure to intimate partner violence compared to mild or no alcohol use at all. Children, as you know, who grow up in homes where they have witnessed violence or threats of violence between parents, more especially where alcohol is involved, are more likely to resort to harmful drinking patterns and increase the risk of becoming perpetrators of violence later in life. Let's break this vicious cycle. Silence begets violence, not in my name. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to applaud President Cyril Ramaphosa on the launch of the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide earlier this year. To implement this blueprint and to see tangible and to see some tangible and to see sorry about this. To conclude, I would like to applaud President Cyril Ramaphosa on the launch of the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide earlier this year. To implement this blueprint and to see tangible change, we call for bold action, brave leadership, scrupulous accountability, and adequate resourcing. The National Strategic Plan, ladies and gentlemen, is not just for government. All South Africans need to be part of its implementation and support it and take action in their homes and communities. I commit the support of the entire United Nations towards the implementation of the National Strategic Plan. The UN response is a multi-agency one, simply because we understand sectoral nature of the problem. Remember, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men and women to do nothing. The time for complacency has passed and belongs to another era. The silence on violence against women and children and the impunity with which this happens has been broken. If I must leave you with one key message, it is action, implementation, and implementation. And the time is now. Silence begets violence, not in my name. I thank you.
Ms. Nardos Bekele-Thomas, thank you so much. That was really very insightful, so many key messages, and you really kept us with you right through. Now, if I think about the 17 sustainable goals that the UN has set about, they really are aiming to solve a lot of problems for the world globally. And the process to get to that number was very well thought out, looking into the challenges that human beings are facing. Which ones do you think are sitting at the root of the problem that we have right now? In my mind, I think of poverty as one of the key things. I think of a lack of education as one of the key things, which really has also resulted in the loss of values. I think of the broken down societies we live in as people have gone through wars or colonization, a removal of their culture. I'm going to hand it over to you as the expert. If you could tell me, what do you think is really at the foundation? What has caused this broken society that we are dealing with? Because GBV is but just a manifestation of some level of brokenness that's far below. What, in your view, based on the goals that the UN has, is really sitting at the cause of this? And once solved and attacked, we'll see an improvement as well on gender-based violence.
Thank you very much. I think there are two core causes of this thing. The first one is poverty, like you rightly said. And the second one is inequality, which creates, in a way, hopelessness, dependence, despondence. And that breeds, the culture of, depleted values, societal values. Hopelessness is the enemy number one. And therefore, if you look at our SDGs, literally, gender-based violence cuts across all the 17 goals, from poverty, inequality, to the education system, to health, to all these, it cuts across. So I guess, we need, that's why we say the Sustainable Development Goals are interrelated, interlinked, and we cannot satisfy one, and say we have achieved it. We have to really look at it in a very holistic way, and that calls for a whole society, a whole government approach. And partnership, then the end one comes to play, because there is a need for solidarity and collaboration.
And I thank you so much for your time again and the great insights that you have offered. This is a long road we are walking, and one of the key questions that I'd like to ask, I probably have two. One of them is, what do you believe is the call to action? If you had to say, what are the things that people need to for themselves? And again, repeat the statement for me, because it probably goes back to the statement that you've been saying, not on your watch should it happen. So that's one of the key questions, is what is the call to action for all citizens? And I think the second one as well is, do you see progress? Have you seen progress? Do you think we are putting in place the right things? And are we not just running talk shops, but actually seeing sustainable change in societies?
I'll start with the last one, and then I'll go to the second one. I think there has been a lot of changes towards really addressing the gender-based violence. Even in this country, from the total shutdown, to where we had the summit, where the president himself presided, and then the establishment of the National Steering Committee, we came out with a very participatory, all-inclusive, national strategic plan, which is now launched, and we need to implement it. And, if we implement, the 6 points that are there in the National Strategic Plan, we will be in a good position to tackle gender-based violence, in this country. And the president has rightly said that the gender-based violence is a crisis. But because it is a crisis, we're not going to implement, hopefully, the National Strategic Plan at a pace that we are implementing any other plan. It is a crisis, and urgency and rigor is very important. And we have introduced the Rapid Results Initiative based on a results-based management and seeing, and focusing on impact, not on processes, not on bureaucratic processes. And therefore, I hope there is a new era where we are seeing, urgency to this matter. And we know that it is a shadow pandemic. The way we got together in tackling the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic, I think we will also have to really get together and rally around to do the same in eradicating gender-based violence. This country has gotten rid of apartheid. I mean, the fight was not just, the things that we see, from communities to youth organizations to women. Everybody was organized for one cause, fighting apartheid. And the same way we should do for gender-based violence, and we should fight it and uproot it. But also in the meantime, as we had said earlier on, it cannot just be done, in a very simple way, but, it has to be in tandem with fighting poverty, with fighting inequality, and addressing the historical injustices of this country. So, we have to be all together, society. Everyone should really pull the sleeves and say, we are going to make this country a better country, promised country for our children. It's not for us, but for our children and grandchildren.
Thank you so much. I love your closing statement. I think if we could have the institutional memory that helped us to fight apartheid and see what did we do and do really well, how do we take some of those learnings and put them onto this very same struggle? If you look at how we fought the fight across the continent on HIV and AIDS, especially in South Africa as well. If we took those lessons and said, how did we do it then, and mobilize the very same structures and the very same resources, the same thinking into solving for gender-based violence, we should be able to win this battle much quicker. But thank you for your insightful presentation. It is amazing and wonderful to see you again. And I really thank you and look forward to seeing you not next year this time, but hopefully sooner and many more times. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.